We're going to talk today a little bit about academic literacies and what it means to read and write in a college setting, but also, just basically in life. And we're going to use discussion boards to help us discuss that. Most of you watching this video right now are taking courses that have discussion boards in them because most of us are online completely or partially through this semester because some people won't wear masks or get vaccinated. So we're going to talk about what it means to be academically literate on a discussion board or in a class, but more particularly what it means to read and write and what the situation of writing is. I've got a PowerPoint here, obviously, and I'm going to share this PowerPoint. I sometimes like creating PowerPoints because it helps students visualize what we're talking about as we talk about it. My PowerPoints are not real detailed. They don't usually have a whole lot of words on them. I usually just try to use a few words and some images. So you'll still have to listen and follow along, and if you're taking notes, take notes. You should be taking notes since this is part of the work of a class. Here we go. So, you got a discussion board post. When you're in a class, whether you are live in a classroom or you are on an online class, you have some expectation of being there, being present. Now, some classes just want you to sit there and shut up and listen and take notes. And I've been in those classes before. They're not always the most fascinating thing, but I can guarantee you that the professor in that class still wants your presence. They want you engaged. And they want to see that you are involved in what's going on, even if they don't want to hear a word from you. I actually, in grad school, got a B in a class. And in grad school, generally you want to get all A's. I got a B in a class because I wasn't terribly engaged in what the professor had to say because I like to talk in a class and the professor never called on anybody. And I started falling asleep in class. And even though my writing was perfectly fine, all my work was fine, because I wasn't engaged, the professor gave me a B. You got to do a discussion board. It's worth asking, why does your professor ask you to do discussion boards? Why does your professor ask you to talk in class? I will say that, it's a general expectation, so maybe some people are doing it without even thinking about it, but why is that expectation there? Ideally, we have moved away from an education that requires you just to listen to my voice, which is kind of ironic since that's what you're doing right now, you to just take down what your brilliant professor says and you to repeat back to the professor what you have said. And ideally, we've entered into an educational moment where we are co-creating, you and I and your fellow classmates, this space of learning. The discussion board tries to do that. A discussion board asks you to accomplish something. It sets out a task for you, and then it asks you to meet that task. So, how do you think about the task of a discussion board? Well, here's some ways some people think about it, and maybe you think about it in multiple ways, so not just one of these. A discussion board is bullshit busy work. It's just something somebody makes you do. Nobody ever reads it. Nobody cares about it. It's just something bleh. You put it out there and you're done. Some people don't think about a discussion board. They just do it not because it's bullshit busy work, but because they trust that their teacher is telling them to do something. They've got to do it, and so they just do it. So on one hand, we've got kind of a resentful way of approaching work, and the other is kind of an apathetic way. I'm just going to do it. Some people approach a discussion board thinking about that others are going to judge them, that they want to be careful, they want to be thoughtful, they want to sound smart, because they're worried about how other people are going to other people are going to judge them. Some approach it because they want to talk to people. They actually want that authentic engagement that can happen on a discussion board when one person's saying something, another person's responding, and you get into a discussion. Some people are just overwhelmed by the whole thing. They see all those words and it just fills them with dread. Sometimes I feel that way when I've got to go and back and look at all the discussion boards and see how people are doing and how people are participating. It fills me with dread a little bit when I have to open all that up. But generally, it's a feeling like it's just so much work. I don't even want to think about what's going on there. And some people look at discussion boards as a challenge. Oh, I can actually try to figure out this puzzle of doing something that's meaningful in a site that where some people are not doing meaningful things. I ask you to think about that. When you open your discussion board, how are you approaching it? What is it? Why is it meaningful to you? Why is it meaningful to your professor? Why is it meaningful to those people around you? What's going on in this discussion board? It is way too easy to do one of these first two things. Or it's way too easy just to skip it altogether, unless you know why you are doing it and why it's meaningful. We're going to talk now for a couple minutes about academic literacy, but also rhetorical literacy. So academic literacy is basically the sense, well, first let's define literacy. The definition for literacy is down here at the bottom right of your screen. Literacy is a capability to understand and act in specific contexts. I have a typo there, it should be to act. Literacy is the capability to understand and act in specific contexts. Now, I'm a highly literate person. I have lots of capability, and I'm not bragging when I say that. It's just that's the nature of going to college and teaching is you build lots of literacy practices. I'm a highly literate person. I have lots of capability to understand and act in specific contexts. I don't always do it. Sometimes I just blow it off. Sometimes I say this is bullshit and I don't care. I have the capability. So that's literacy. It's having that capability. Academic literacy is the capability to understand and act in school, in academic situations, to be able to meet the demands of an academic class, usually through reading and writing, and being able to perform at an adequate level in those classes. Doesn't mean you always do it, but having that academic literacy is important. Let me give you an example. When you take your kids to kindergarten for the first day, some teachers or some parents will have talked to those kids, will have taught them ABCs, will have taught them how to understand rules and why to understand a teacher. Some kids will have had very little teaching. They won't know the ABCs. It's a whole brand new concept to them. They won't understand rules. And all these kids are thrown into a classroom together. Some kids have a great deal of academic literacy when they enter into the kindergarten classroom. Other kids do not. Doesn't mean any kid is smarter or better or more valuable than another kid. It's just different levels of academic literacy. Okay, rhetorical literacy. Rhetorical literacy is a little bit different than academic literacy. Rhetorical literacy is based on the idea of rhetoric, which is the art of persuasion. And so if you are rhetorically literate, that means you can understand, you have the capability to understand and act in rhetorical situations. You can read and write and speak and create and understand creation in a rhetorical situation. You understand the persuasion of the moment. The picture here is Frederick Douglass giving his what does 4th of July mean to a slave speech. There, I move my picture again. So, reading and writing with rhetorical literacy, which in this case also means with academic literacy. What do you need to think about? What do you need to do in order to read and write with rhetorical literacy, particularly on, say, discussion boards? Well, the first thing you have to do is identify the call to write. What is it that's calling you to write in this specific moment? The second thing you have to do is discover your purposes. What are the purposes for writing? And I'm going to come back to this list in just a second to talk about reading. What are your purposes for writing? The third thing you need to do is focus on your goals. Goals are different than purposes, so what are your goals in doing this writing? The fourth thing, articulate meaning. How are you going to bring out meaning in this moment? The fifth thing, recognize audience. Who is your audience? How do you need to speak to them? The sixth thing is the space of reading and writing. What is the context in which you're writing? What situation? And the seventh thing, last thing, is the production concerns. How are you going to produce, and what is the value of what you're producing? Now, we can take all those things you think about as a writer and now flip them to a reader, because we can approach any text and ask, how did the writer identify their call to write? Why did they start writing this? How did the writer discover her purposes and bring them out for us as readers? What do we know about the writer's purpose? What were the writer's goals? What were they trying to get as a result of what they're doing? What was the writer's meaning? What were they trying to say to us? Who are we? Who are the audiences that a writer is writing to? What is the specific context of writing, the space that they're writing in? And how is this production? How does this production come into being as a text for us? When you can read and write with rhetorical literacy, you begin to learn an awful lot about the act of reading and writing, but also about the given context. So, for instance, if we go back to a discussion board post and we read the prompt that a teacher gives us, then we start to understand a little bit about the rhetorical context. We can understand why a professor is asking us what to do, or what they're thinking about, and what we're supposed to produce. When it comes to writing our own post in a discussion board, we can start to think about our purposes and our meanings and our audience and our situation. And when we read other people's discussion board posts, we can think about our purposes and our audiences and our meaning and our situation. So if I click on your post and I start reading it, I can start to get a pretty good assessment of whether or not you're meeting this rhetorical situation, or differently, how you are meeting this rhetorical situation. I can start to actually make some guesses. How did you think about this task? Based on what you've written, because I understand the rhetorical situation. We're going to actually now go into each of these areas and talk about them in a little bit more detail with a focus on the discussion board. And we're thinking about this both as reading and writing. And I want to make sure you're clear at this point, because I've been talking for a couple minutes, that what we're doing here, we're talking about discussion board posts. I want you to have great discussion boards. I want you to be engaged in them. But we are really using discussion boards to talk about writing and reading in school and why it's meaningful. So the call to write on a discussion board, your call to write is the context. What is it that's calling you into that situation? And in a discussion board, that's the prompt. Another call to write might be yourself, whether or not you're inspired to write and how that pushes you to write. And another call to write might be others. You want to respond to others, or you want to persuade others and influence others, and that's really calling on you to take action and write. So you know that there's somebody in the class. There's somebody in the class, and you really want to grab that person's attention. Often it's the teacher, but maybe there's somebody in the class that's kind of cute, and you want their attention. Or maybe there's somebody in the class that you just can't stand, and you want their attention. There's also the context, of course. You've got to meet the demands of the writing prompt for the discussion board, and then there's yourself, how you make this a meaningful task for yourself. The point of this is that there are multiple calls to write in almost every situation. You are being called to this moment of writing by multiple things that are grabbing your attention. And that also goes for the reading. When you are reading somebody, they have multiple reasons for writing and multiple calls to write. And figuring those out can make your reading experience much more fulfilling. This goes along with purposes and goals. And we often interchange those two things, but a purpose is the reason you're doing something, and a goal is the outcome that you want. So, in the case of a discussion board post, you may want to use your time efficiently. You don't want to spend any more time on that discussion board than you have to, because maybe your ultimate goal is just to do the work and don't waste time. Your purpose is you want to have competent writing that makes sense, writing that is clear, writing that accomplishes the prompt, because you want to earn an acceptable grade. Maybe your purposes get a little bit more complex. You want to write with power. You want to have an effect on people, because your goal is to persuade and influence. Maybe your purpose is to be interesting and unique. You want to stand out. You want to write something that other people notice, because you want to have other people notice you. Maybe you write funny in a funny manner, or maybe you write in a profound manner, maybe you write in a serious manner, maybe you write in a dismissive manner, because you want to engage with others. Maybe you're using this writing moment as a place to practice and refine your writing, to practice and refine your skills, because your goal is to learn about writing for others. And maybe you're seeing this post, this discussion board, as an opportunity to express your authentic or your inauthentic self. You've decided you want to be real here, or you've decided you want to put on a mask here. And your goal is to control what you reveal. Now again, we can spin these and look at it from the reading side. How did the writer approach their purpose here? How did they accomplish their goals based on those purposes? The next couple of things you think about when it comes to rhetorical literacy is, who are you as a writer, and what are you trying to say? And who is your audience, and what are they hearing? I have here a image of Margaret Cho, who's a fascinating comedian, very funny, speaking to doing our comedy routine in front of a large group of people. When we think about this, when Margaret Cho thinks about this, she is trying to create a message so that her audiences receive that message, and that message and that audience reception together make a meaning that is shared with each other. When her audience thinks about this, they're trying to hear Margaret's message, and they're trying to understand it so that together they can make meaning. This is a rhetorical situation, and let's get it much more complex than that. Margaret Cho speaks as a Asian American voice, as a woman with a voice, as an actress, as a not atypical body size woman, as a queer woman. She speaks at multiple levels with multiple messages as a writer. And her audiences are complex as well. Her audiences are people who are highly sympathetic, people who are highly hostile, people who just want to laugh, and people who want to think. And maybe sometimes there are multiple mixes within those reception areas. The rhetorical situation is really complex. And often we don't give it nearly enough thought, because we just think, oh, this is just some bullshit I got to do. So if you think about your discussion board post, who are you? What are you trying to represent? Who is your audience, and how are they going to accept it? And what is the meaning that is developed? Or as you're reading somebody's discussion post, who is that person that's writing that? What are they trying to present? And who are you as an audience, and who are the other members of the audience, and how is this creating meaning? Is all this getting a little abstract? Is it floating in your head a little bit, and you're trying to say, I just want to write a discussion board post. What's the point of all this? That makes sense. I understand. And listening to a lecture on YouTube, or watching a lecture on YouTube, maybe not the most fascinating thing for you. But I want you thinking about your rhetorical literacy and your academic literacy. And I want you thinking about how you're developing those through the work we do. I gotta keep on moving my face. The final couple of areas that we think about are the context of your writing, that writing situation. What is your space of writing and reading? And that is this area around this text. What is the type of text? Is it a online post? Is it a book that you're writing? Is it a song that you're creating? Are you creating that song on a stage, or is it a pre-recorded song? Is it a long book written for adults or children? There are all different kinds of questions about spaces of reading and writing. As somebody creating discussion board posts or reading discussion board posts, you have to think about, what is this space of reading and writing? What happens in the discussion boards that make them really suck is when nobody thinks about that and they just create stuff because that's what they're supposed to do. If you think about this space of reading and writing as trying to accomplish something, and a discussion board post becomes an opportunity for both academic and social development, it becomes something more. Along those lines, once you've determined what your space of reading and writing, you've got to consider production concerns. And I'm using a picture of the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek here within the whole body of space. Now, we know that if the ship here is not constructed well, if that vessel doesn't offer protection, everybody in that ship dies, right? Because space is this airless, soundless space that will just destroy a physical body. So, in this metaphor, we're thinking about the Starship Enterprise within space, and what we're thinking about now with this is your discussion board post within the whole body of discussion boards. How are you creating this vessel for your ideas to ride in? What is the quality of what you're creating? How much effort did you put into it? How much engagement do you have with your own writing? And how are you creating a textual experience that can survive the demands of space? And we can turn it again to reading. What is the quality of what you're reading? Or what is the quality of the thing that you're reading? How much effort does it require? How much engagement are you putting into it? What is that overall textual experience? These areas, your purpose and your goals, your message and your audience, your space of reading and your production concerns, and what's being produced. I might have missed one here. Oh, the call to write. What is the call to write? Sorry. These areas of the rhetorical situation, of rhetorical literacy, allow you to think about some pretty deep level stuff when it comes to writing, and you can apply this thinking to multiple spaces of writing. When you read a book, when you watch a movie, when you write a song, both from the reading side and the writing side, you can analyze the rhetorical situation to make that situation more meaningful for yourself. In a discussion board, we ask, well, why do we want to do that? What's going on here? Well, one way to think about it, outside of all this rhetorical literacy stuff, one way to think about what we do in a classroom is try to create community. What we do on a discussion board is try to create community. Why does community matter? Well, because you matter, and the others around you matter, and I matter, and how we build our connections together matter. Now, maybe you don't want any kind of connections at all through college. I don't think that's probably true, but some people feel that way. Don't make me feel anything. Don't make me connect to anything. I don't want to talk to you, teacher, or I don't want to talk to you, fellow student, because I don't want to feel anything here. You may feel like that's the case, but the truth of the matter is you are going to school. You did engage in a social situation, and so at some level, you are deciding that community matters. And how we build those connections with each other matter. This doesn't mean that we as a class are all going to enter into a group marriage and spend the rest of our lives together. I mean, that'd be cool if it happened, but probably not going to happen. And what it does mean, though, is that we do have an opportunity to build meaningful connection. And that is if we believe and trust that our reading and our writing for each other matters, especially in an online class, especially on a discussion board. If we're in a classroom, your physical body makes me recognize your humanity. I have to recognize your humanity. I can't ignore it because it's right there in my face. And if you started to laugh, I respond to your laugh. If you sneeze, I respond to your sneeze. In a COVID era, if you cough, I respond to your cough. Online, it's a little different. It's harder to feel that. And what we do have to express ourselves, what we do have to draw that connection is our reading and writing. What I'd like you to see here is that good relationships, good community require rhetorical literacy. We have to understand how we create and how we understand in order to build good relationships. And believe it or not, I just gave you great advice for a marriage or for a long-term relationship. Just gave you great advice for the workplace. This is what it means to connect with other people, to build rhetorical literacy and be able to build a much deeper understanding of how we connect. Because every act of reading and writing is an act of creating relationships, even in a discussion board. Every act of reading and writing is an act where you are creating relationships. The question to ask yourself is, what type of relationships do you desire? What steps do you take in your reading and writing to build those relationships? I hope we have some meaningful relationships to build on our discussion boards. I hope we can come together and discuss some interesting ideas, but more important than that, that we can start to develop into a community that uses our reading and writing on discussion boards to develop our rhetorical and our academic literacy. I appreciate you being here today. I hope you got something out of this, and I look forward to seeing you on the discussion boards. Take care.